This is Robert Merdlacci, the MindShare Learning Report and chair of this coming week's Canadian EdTech Leadership Summit, 15th anniversary at the University of Toronto. And welcome to MindShareTV. And today we're thrilled to have Mitch Weisburgh with us, a legend in EdTech, an educational innovator and passionate advocate for the transformative power of mind shifting. Mitch is well known for his work in education, technology, and helping educators and institutions navigate new ways of thinking to meet the ever-evolving demands of 21st century AI-inspired classroom, if you will, with a wealth of experience in leadership, learning strategies, and future-focused education. Mitch brings a unique perspective to our conversation today.
Robert, do you
Mitch,
think I could meet that guy, Mitch?
absolutely.
Okay, good.
Today's theme, unlocking new perspectives in education from mindshare to mind shifting. I love it, Mitch. What better way to have a conversation than with you today, despite being 6 days away from my summit.
I
I
know
was a bit,
everything's happening, right?
it's amazing. I was so stressed. And then I get on with you and we get talking about really cool stuff around learning and innovation. And we were both in Portugal recently. I was on an educational travel tourism tour, and I did visit the Institute of Porto, which was a learning facility, and loved that. And you had a really fascinating experience as well. Why don't we kick it off with a little bit about that mission,
hmm
and then we'll segue over to mind shifting.
Well, so the trip to Portugal was incredible. This was actually the second year that I've been to Porto. Uh, there's three people who run the largest education technology conference in Portugal, and it's called EduTabi. Tabi, because when they first started it like 10, 12 years ago, tablets were new. So it's
I remember that.
EduTabi, yeah. And what they did is they invited U.S., Australian, India educators to come visit really the best of the best schools in Portugal. And so we visited four schools where you walk into the school and it's like you're walking into a garden. It's just so fresh. Uh,
Wow.
the kids are having a great time. The teachers are having a great time. The kids are learning. The teachers are learning. Everybody's so engaged, and so we visited four schools, combination of uh, K to three schools, K to six schools, high schools. Three of the schools were private. Of the three schools that were private, one of the schools is actually owned by the teachers, and one of the schools was public,
Brilliant.
and it was phenomenal.
Well, uh, I'm fascinated by that, and we're talking off air. It would be wonderful to do a similar Can-Am kind of exchange in Canada and vice versa, because there's so much to learn. It's about the human connection, and that's as much as the theme around our summit is navigating future education, an AI-inspired world. There's a lot of conversations around human intelligence, human connection, and demystifying AI.
Right. And, I think something like this summit, where you have educators visiting schools and you get to sit down in the classes and basically kind of play with the kids as the kids are doing their projects, it establishes that connection and gets you to understand that, you know, AI is a tool, but it's just a tool. We're people, and we're going to be successful by connecting with others and working with others in order uh, to make the world a better place.
Amazing. How many years for you in that tech, Mitch?
So 21, 22
And you
years.
segued over from,
I segued over originally from training business people how to use the computer. And I started a business in 1981, initially teaching people in 4 hours how to do spreadsheets using VisiCalc. And
Wow,
right back in 1981, and then that blossomed to, we ended up having 7 offices. We had about 130 people,
incredible.
and then kind of segued over to online learning, and started doing consulting work for education publishers, which in that time there was no technology, and their view of education technology was that, oh, we're going to take our textbook and we're going to make a PDF out of it, and we're going to sell it to schools. And look, we could charge schools an annual amount. We don't have to wait for these once every 10 years adoptions anymore. We can make a lot more money. And so that was their view of how they were going to use technology, and kind of working with them on, that's really not how technology is going to be used in schools, and then eventually over to game-based learning, and then eventually over to mind shifting kind of by accident.
It is accidental, and not it all begins with the conversation as I mind shifted over from York University to Kevin O'Leary's little
Wow.
startup called the Learning Company, and I did
That was a
that.
great company.
We became the largest global ed tech company, and this was 25 plus years ago.
Hmm.
So I launched his startup school division in Canada. Didn't exist. That was my
Wow.
first startup,
Uh-huh.
and we were sold to Mattel. It was an absolute
I remember that.
disaster.
Right. Yeah.
Absolute disaster, and I learned so much. We went from the top to the bottom, and we went sold for 3.6 billion. A real lesson for entrepreneurs in edtech. We were sold for 3.6 billion. I went through a dozen acquisitions in 18 months. Kathy Hurley was my senior VP at the time, and it resold a year later for 300 million. And the CEO of Darling of Wall Street, Joe Berard,
Right.
was fired from Mattel
Hmm.
because they bought something they didn't know. Do your homework. A professor of mine, Dr. Bryce Taylor, who passed when I was in sport admin, and I know you have a bit of a sports background from Union College. Incidentally, my boys were being recruited to play hockey at Union back
Really.
in, yes.
But they didn't.
They got into two very good business schools in Canada, but we spent time at the Union College
Union got
campus.
into the Frozen Four. It's there were only like 2,000 kids in the whole
That's
college,
right.
and they got
That
into
the
the
year they
Frozen Four.
won was the year they were being recruited,
Hmm.
and one of my schoolmates' sons, Champini, was one of the top players that scored a hat trick one game in the semifinal. But yeah, it's a little trivia about Mitch. He was a swimmer and skier and track.
Hmm.
Yeah, back in the day, and sport is so important. I'm always biased to hiring people that have a bit of a sports background and experience that struggle and resiliency that
Hmm.
you go through.
Right, because in sports, you're never on a straight trajectory to success, right? And so you always have times where you don't play your best, or you lose points. Did you by any chance see Roger Federer's address at Dartmouth?
I did. That was the most incredible speech. How long was it? I
So the
put it.
speech was like 25 minutes, but you can, I mean, the whole speech to me was mesmerizing. But there's like a 3-minute segment of it that you
Yes,
watch, where he's explaining like
the
the most
points.
important. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, okay. So the point that you're playing is the most important thing in the world, and as soon as it's done, and the next point is the most important thing in the world, and it's like, you learn from it and you move on.
Remarkable. And to that point, no pun intended, I never look back. I'm so used to moving forward and
Hmm.
moving fast. I do reflect, but I don't dwell. Don't
Right.
dwell, right? And that's the challenge today, post COVID, on the challenge of well being and the importance of being involved in sports and extracurricular, getting outdoors and not dwelling on the point that you might not have won.
Right. And so in mind shifting, so
It's a great
one of
segue.
it's a great segue, because what 99 and 44 100ths of people don't realize is that our our brains are bad. You can think of our brains as really two parts, right? There's the part that developed in lower level animals, and then there's the part that really became developed in humanoids and human beings. And when we think of ourselves as human, the ability to collaborate, to think creatively, to think critically, to connect with other people, those are all things that happen in our higher order parts of the brain. But it's our lower order parts of the brain that evolved to be able to survive. And one of the survival instincts is fear. And so once those lower parts of the brain start feeling fear, they have the ability to completely shut off our higher parts of the brain.
Hmm.
And you need to understand the techniques to be able to reset, quiet that part of the brain, and then tap into your higher order functions. And
Fascinating.
that's a part of mind shifting, to be able to do
So,
that.
so you said it was accidental. Why is mind shifting? Why mind shifting? And is it in the Urban Dictionary? Because mindshare
Right.
learning, mindshare is
Good for you. Good for you. I have no
mindshare.
idea if mind shifting is in the
Well,
dictionary.
mindshare learning is, and
Well, it should
so
be.
yeah, it should be right.
Right.
So uh, let's start with the basics. When you talk about mind shifting, what does that really mean, and why do you believe it's something educators, students, even in the wider community should
Should really care about, right?
pay attention or care about?
Yep. So everything that we do stems from our mind frame or our mindset. So when that mind frame or that mindset gets hijacked by our survival instincts, we don't have the chance to tap into our resourcefulness or resilience. And we tend to do things in, say, one of five different ways without even realizing it. So the first thing that we learn how to do from a survival standpoint is freeze, and then fight, and then flight. And those are the things that we hear about most. It's, oh, it's the fight and flight, but
Right.
also freeze. And then also those parts of the brain, they're very, very fast, and they generally do things that they already know how to do. So I would call those habits or fluencies that we already have. And so that's the fourth type of action. And the fifth type of action is that those parts of the brain are also wired to do whatever the rest of the herd is doing, whatever other people are doing. So that's where you get like peer pressure, or the urge to go along with other people who are, say, in your tribe, or in your political party. Uh, and so when we get locked into those, we lose our ability to critically think about things, to come up with new alternatives, to connect with others, to work together to solve problems. And mind shifting is the ability for us to recognize, first of all, in ourselves that we're doing that, and to come out of it to tap into our most resourcefulness. And then imagine if we could train the next generation so that as they become adults, they're already resourceful and resilient and collaborative, and able to understand what's really important to them and constantly move towards those things.
Fascinating. And I was just speaking with our co-op students that left a few minutes ago about their skills and preparing them for the next level,
Hmm.
and the importance of organization, the importance of honing your, we call them the 7 C's, but having
Yep.
those critical, essential skills that prepares you for a future that isn't clearly seen. But I love the notion of mind shifting. In fact, I'm going to ask you a question around the why. And I was just talking to my wife the other day about why everyone's so busy. Like, for me to get mind share from people who might come to our summit is extremely difficult. Everything's so
Right.
fragmented post COVID. Everyone's so busy. Everybody in education is already overscheduled and stressed. And
Hmm.
you want to add one more thing like mind shifting. Why not just add you know, a little until things are back to normal? Like, talk to me about it, because it's no secret that educators have tremendous pressure.
Yep.
Why should educators consider implementing mind shifting techniques rather than waiting until things calm down? And how things, to help ease the current challenges. The state of well-being is a crisis among students
Yep.
today. I have to ask you the tough
Right.
question. Sorry.
So you want me to answer that in like 3 words or something, or in two
Five.
seconds, five words? Well, basically, things are not going to return back to normal. Okay, we have this, because of our limbic, our primitive minds, ways of doing things. We're going to go back and we're going to try to do the things that we've always done, and they weren't really working before, and they're certainly not going to work now. And we have to learn how to relax our minds and be more resourceful and resilient. I think, like, it's going to, first of all, it's going to make us happier, and second of all, it's going to make us more productive. I'm thinking of like two examples. One education, education example, and one, say, outside of education. So um, this one teacher, middle school teacher. Okay, so she's got this middle school girl,
Mm-hmm.
and the teacher's teaching the classes, and the girl almost never comes to class. She sits outside the class. She doesn't do her homework, and she's just, she's got this reputation of she doesn't care. She's uninterested, and you might as well give up on her because she's never going to amount to anything. And
Mm-hmm.
the teacher's taking the class, and we're dealing, uh, in this session, we're dealing with the powers of our resilient minds, and one of the powers is empathy. And the challenge that she had for that day, for me, was make this day all about empathy. And somebody who you don't think that you have any empathy with, just say, if I were really empathetic and I really wanted to connect with this person, what would I do? So she's sitting in class. She sees the girl outside of the class, not really paying attention, scrolling on her phone. And she says to herself, you know something? I'm going to use this empathy thing. I'm going to see if I can
Mm-hmm.
connect with this girl. So she goes outside of the class and she says, what are you doing? And she says, well, I'm going through, TikTok and Instagram. What are you looking at? She says, well, I'm looking at cooking. And the teacher says, oh, I'm really interested in cooking too. And the girl says, you are? She says, yeah, I watch all these cooking shows. And they
Cool.
start talking about cooking. And then she says, well, why are you watching the cooking shows? She says, well, my mother left us a couple years ago, so I live with my
Mm.
father and my grandparents, and I have three younger sisters. And basically, I have to come home and I take care of the family. I make the meals, I clean
Wow.
the house, I do everything for the family, and this gives me some ideas of things that I can cook for the family. So the teacher starts talking to her about that, and she says, "Well, let me ask you a question. Is one of the reasons why you don't come into the class and you don't do the things that teachers say is because you're used to being the adult at home, and when you come into school you're treated as a kid?" She says, that's exactly the issue. I'm doing
Wow.
real adult things, and I come into school and you all treat me like I'm this little kid, so I just like go into my own world. And she says from that moment on there was this incredible change between her and the girl in school. And that's really that's why, that's just one example of why we should be, doing mind shifting, because the teacher was a lot happier, the girl was a lot happier, the problem kind of melted away because she was able to tap into her ability, which she always had, but her abilities to connect with people. And that was the class that she took, Mastering Your Resourceful Brain.
So, two really hot topics today are AI and banning cell phones.
Right.
What is your take on these two? There's a lot of buzz around AI. We're hosting a summit around AI. The cell phone bans in schools. Virtually every province has banned them.
Hmm.
Every state. What are your thoughts on these issues, and how do they relate to the broader ideas within mind shifting?
When we as human beings see something new, A, to a certain extent, we're attracted to the next new shiny thing. And B, when we actually have to start making changes, we have these fear-based responses. And both of those are due to our limbic brain. So the the what with mind shifting, what you're learning is to ask the right questions. The question isn't should we ban AI or should we ban cell phones? The question is what should we be doing in order to prepare this next generation to fulfill their job as adults? And if we ask those questions, we would be trying different things. Now, also as people, we our natural reaction to things is there's going to be one right way of doing something. Well, AI and cell phones and their use by kids and education, those are complex issues, and by definition, a complex issue is one where nobody knows the answer. So if you understand the concepts of mind shifting, you're going into something like AI or the use of cell phones, and you're saying nobody really knows what the right answers are, and so I need to be trying things and taking small steps so
Hi, I'm
that
Mitch
I can learn
Weisburgh.
from them. And um, and that's a whole different problem solving method than saying, okay, cell phones, okay, let me just ban them. And then the next thing was, you remember, actually the previous thing was 3 years ago, do you remember the idea was, oh yeah, we don't need to give kids computers because every kid can bring in their own device and they have their cell phones, so we'll just use the cell phones. And we just go back from, one solution and then do the exact opposite. We're banning them now, and in 2 years somebody's going to say, well, we shouldn't be banning them, we should be using them in class, instead of trying things and learning from them. And so that's my take on AI and on the cell phones is A, we're not asking the right questions. B, we're approaching it from the standpoint of there's one right solution and we're going to come up with it and we're going to force it down everybody's throats. And then C, we're not trying things and learning from them.
I thank you for that. I love this slide here. Can you talk a little bit about the slide I'm sharing?
Sure. So, um, so when we try things in schools, actually, when we try things, everything as human beings, we, you know, we lock into our survival mindset, which is fearing that we could be hurt, fearing failure. We look at situations and say we want to come up with the one right answer, and when you do that, you tend to go on, one of two sides. Error number one would be something comes up and we're sure right away this is the one thing that we have to do. Error number two is something comes up and we say we have to do analysis and more analysis and more analysis until we have the perfect solution, and we end up not doing anything. And then once we come up with something, we're so sure that we're right that we're not open to look at and reevaluate the results, and we're not open to listening to other people who have different points of view. And all of this contributes our great fear of change and our resistance to trying new things. When we learn how to quiet those parts of the brain so that we can be more resourceful and more resilient, then we find that we ourselves and everybody in the organization or the system is much more motivated. They're much more resilient. They're much better able to solve problems. They're a lot more collaborative. They're adapting to feedback, and they're continuously improving.
Fascinating. Um, this reminds me of, something that could fit into a well-being course. Um, you're hearing me okay? We're getting
Yes, I'm
some
hearing you.
feedback.
And in the background, somebody's cutting down a tree.
I love
Say la vie,
live. I
right?
love live TV.
Right.
Organic. It's organic, pun intended. Um, Mitch, this has been fascinating, and I really think that you're onto something big. You
Thank
know,
you.
I had a conversation with our co-op students before they left, and one of the things that I talked about was the importance of collaboration. Talk
Hmm.
to me about the importance of collaboration, because we did a now I'm getting some someone coming by my
Oh, of course. Right.
space.
Yeah. Live TV. Yeah.
Back at you. I think it's a sign of that we should be wrapping this up. But the importance of collaboration. So this is a post we came up with collaboratively.
Hmm.
Okay, you should have seen the original one.
Uh
It
huh.
was terrible. But then when three of us got together and commented and gave feedback,
Mhm.
and I explained to the students, four of them, the smartest person in the room isn't me, it's not you, it's the room,
It's the room, right?
right? And
Right.
getting them
Angela
to,
Myers, right? That's
right,
Angela Myers.
getting them to understand that and make an impact and they said when you're going to be working in groups, you've already worked in groups.
Hmm.
The key when you're working in a group is come to an understanding. We all have gifts.
Right.
Everyone's got to contribute. You don't want the 80-20 rule. You don't want 80% of the work being done by 20% of the people. This is leadership,
Yep.
right? You're a leader. I'm a leader. It didn't happen
Hmm.
organically. We honed our skills. That's why we're passionate about what we do. And we're still that growth mindset. We're still learning, still making an impact. I
Yep.
hope.
Yeah,
I'm
you are.
optimistic,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
But it's so important. Mentorship. Talk to me about mentee mentorship and having that mindset of like teaching is shifting, right? AI literacy. We're talking about AI literacy now,
Hmm.
multi literacies. The teacher is no longer, the smartest person in the room. That's not an easy thing for teachers to understand the value that they bring and the essential professional learning skills that they need to garner
Hmm.
and demystifying AI and getting these kids upskilled so they're resilient, hopeful, agile learners and able to deal with what's coming because you might lose the next point.
Right. So I would suspect that if teachers came to the Canadian EdTech Summit, they would get a lot of techniques for learning how to go about harnessing AI and the ability to lose complete control, but to gain more understanding with your students, right?
Yeah, it's not all about technology, 100%. And my co-chair is a psychologist.
Hmm.
He's got
Okay.
2,000 students in his class.
And I look at the faces of some of the people who are speaking, and I'm thinking, like, I would love to come and listen to them talk about these subjects because they're the ones who can give their perspective, and they're the ones, well, somebody like you or them could be incredible mentors to the educators who will be coming to the Canadian EdTech
Well,
Summit.
thank you for that. And we've intentionally brought together the ecosystem that represents all the stakeholders because we really need all those voices to
Hmm.
really figure it out and have a vision of where we're going in the future, including
Yep.
students. So we've got a great student panel on the Saturday STEM
Oh,
Teacher
perfect.
AI
Yep.
Showcase.
Mm.
Well, Mitch, it's been a real pleasure connecting with you. Thank you for coming up to Toronto to the
Series
Series
play.
Play Conference
That was fun. That was
recently in our
lovely. That was
backyard.
wonderful. Hmm.
So with
And
that,
hope to see
sorry,
you soon.
yeah, likewise. Thank you again,
Robert,
Mitch.
so thank you so much for having me on.
Pleasure. And that was Mitch Weisburgh of MindShifting.org. You can learn a bit more about Mitch by going to his awesome LinkedIn profile, that Mitch Weisburgh. He happens to be an alumni from Union College, where my sons were being recruited to hockey. So that puts you in my highest level
Mm.
of respect books, Mitch. Thank you again. My name is Robert Merdlanchi, the Mindshare Learning Port and chair of the 15th Canadian EdTech Leadership Summit, upcoming next week, October 31st and November 2nd. Check out www.mindsharelearning.com to learn more and register. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.